I think it's important that encouraging anybody, as I need to be encouraged, these are the kind of things you get from the patent office when you're issued a patent. But I want to go over and read to you all the things that happen because I persevered in the face of disappointment. So as of October of 2024, I had 31 patents. I had the first two that were related to the IGF-1 with the red dye. And then I told you I applied in 2010 for protocatechoic acid to be a disease-modifying arthritic drug for osteoarthritis. And so what happened over time is that I learned that PCA was a broad-spectrum antibiotic, and it also had wound healing acceleration properties. I also learned that it could be a biofilm destroyer, and that was a particularly interesting study to prove that, which went beyond what the usual is. What we did in that study is that we coated PCA onto metal and onto cloth, and then we flowed for 48 hours the biofilms, in one case MRSA, the other case Pseudomonas, across these surfaces. At what we found, even with the wash going across where the PCA had been sprayed on and stuck to, that it didn't wash away, and that we destroyed the biofilms in 99.999, 3 decimal places, extremely unusual. So it showed that PCA was a very powerful biofilm destroyer. And then we continued to look in the literature and found out all the different possibilities of protocatechoic acid. And we learned that it also had some value from the standpoint of controlling product would be like lettuce. And so our study was done where we sprayed the seeds of lettuce and then allowed them to grow, and we found out that we increased the amount of PCA in the lettuce. And why is that important? Well, PCA is a benzoic acid, and benzoic acids inside of plants protect the plant from predators and from molds. And so we were able to show that PCA given to a seed in a plant would increase the viability of the plant, and it increased the shelf life of the lettuce and increased the nutrition in the lettuce. We've done some other studies where we found out that we could also coat implants of joints, total joints, or other implants going in, and we would be able to decrease the infection rate. Unfortunately, that requires going to the FDA, and I need to tell you why it's so important that PCA is a nutraceutical, because a nutraceutical, when you do a study on nutraceutical or market a nutraceutical, it's outside of the jurisdiction of the FDA from the standpoint of approval. So if you go to the FDA with a drug, you can say that you're going to spend $1 million to get approval to do the test. If you get approval to do the test, you're going to spend $1 billion, 4.5 years, and a 15% success rate. If you ever wonder why drugs cost so much, it's because of the regulations and the high failure rate. And so unfortunately, protocatechoic acid does not have to go that way. And so it gives us some liberty, and we have some other tests going at major universities and major medical centers right now on the control of infection, because what we can say is we're going to establish that protocatechoic acid affects the beneficially, it affects the structure and the function of the human body. Those are all outside of any necessary FDA regulations. So it gives us a pathway clinically that heretofore would not be easily available. And I should also say that although I know that I presented to every major orthopedic company at the highest level, presidential level, the antibiotic aspect, the biofilm aspect, and the antiviral aspect, no interest, no return on investment. They're not going to invest $1 billion on a 15% risk. And so you have to understand that the pharmaceutical companies and the orthopedic companies are not in the healing business. They're in the medical business. They're in money, and they're responsible not to a patient or to a doctor. They're responsible to their investors. And so they have to have a different perspective than you or I might have as a physician or as a patient. So we have other aspects of the besides the food industry and the ways of treating implants. And so in 2016, I knew that I had antibacterial. I went to the Environmental Protection Agency. And 6 years it was in front of the Environmental Protection Agency and no action. They said they lost it twice. Finally, after 6 years, I then realized in 2020 that I had something that would control the SARS virus, and I thought that would be important. I went back to them, and they said, start over. Why did that happen? Well, here's the thing. I didn't know this, but I paid $2,000 as an individual to get in front of the EPA, and Pfizer pays $400,000. And so the EPA people are interested in their cash flow and not interested in an individual. I had no chance of getting through. So when I went before them at the 6-year interval, I brought a consultant with me, and I heard what they had to say, which I didn't understand. After the consulting was done, I called my consultant. I said, what did they say? He said, they're basically telling you that no matter what you do, they're not going to consider it. So another dead end. But I wasn't going to be discouraged. So we continue to look at the SARS virus, and we found out that we could control that. But I didn't know this. The SARS virus is what you call an encoded virus. And so there are many kinds of encoded virus. And since I had the patent on the SARS virus that was encoded and showed in 2 separate contract labs, independent contract labs, that I could control it, I then received a patent on RSV and also a patent on the influenza, the treatment of influenza. But those will languish because those would probably take an FDA approval, but at least I do have that. And so I continued over the years, and finally the 14 years went by, and I was then got the patent issued on use of protocotuic acid for arthritis. And what was interesting to me, that after waiting all those time, what the benefit was, that my application was for the treatment of osteoarthritis, and that was all my science was involved. But what happened when the patent came back, it said, a method of treating and reducing the severity of a joint injury or disease in a mammal, administering a composition consisting of protocotuic acid. Why was that so important? I only asked for osteoarthritis because there was prior art for other kinds of arthritis like rheumatoid or psoriatic. I was unable to get a patent on that, so I couldn't apply for that. But by some interesting, and I don't know why, or explanation, after the 14 years and the third patent examiner came back, and now what I have is I have the treating and reducing the severity of joint injury or disease. That includes psoriatic, rheumatoid, every other kind of arthritis. What a blessing that was, and maybe it was worth waiting the 14 years. So the bottom line is, here's the list of principles. You have to have a need, you have to be curious, you have to be a great observer, and you have to continuously be curious and observant. And you've got to be alert to observations, things that you see. Stay curious, and you've got to have a vision or an imagination of what's possible. And like every seed there is, it has to have a dormant period. So if I get an apple seed, if it has a dormant period, you put it in the ground, eventually it'll grow an apple tree. And I have found that with every other kind of idea I've had, those seeds always have a dormant period. And for protocotuic acid, it was a 14-year dormant period. So you have to continue to pursue. You have to realize that if you get discouraged, one thing can lead to another. So that discouragement, I ended up with a broad-spectrum antibiotic, a biofilm destroyer, a way to treat acne, a way to have a wrinkle treatment and get rid of scars, and a way to treat burns. So remember, you always have to have a plan B. You have to be persistent. And the final analysis, I was blessed with a language that covered everyone. And so here I am now, 14 years later, we have joint health ready to treat any form or any type of arthritis and have all the science backing it.